Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Greenwich and Woolwich, and I want to thank him for being in his place, and to thank all Honourable Members who've spoken in this important debate. We've had over 15 speeches and a number of important interventions. I also want to thank the Right Honourable Member for Doncaster North for his constructive approach to this important piece of legislation. Mr Deputy Speaker, in the 7 minutes available to me to wrap up, I want to try and deal with as many of the points that have been made as possible. But first of all, I'd like to remind the House of what this bill really signifies and what it does. The Net Zero strategy, published earlier this month, sets out our vision for a decarbonised economy by 2050, and this will see the power sector fully decarbonised by 2035, with nuclear power playing a key role alongside renewables. And as the Prime Minister set out from this box earlier today, he and the Cabinet are putting every effort at COP into delivering that international leadership to that end. This bill creates a new funding model for future nuclear projects that will support our transition to a secure, resilient and affordable low-carbon electricity system. And the measures in this bill are critical to ensuring that we have the option to bring forward further nuclear capacity, delivering a system that's lower cost for consumers than if we relied on intermittent power sources alone. And whilst consumers will contribute to the cost of new nuclear projects during their construction, by lowering the cost of financing nuclear, analysis shows that this will save roughly £30 billion over the life of this refinancing compared to relying on existing mechanisms. So it's very good to hear and sensible of the opposition opposite not to vote against this tonight. I'd be very surprised if any member decides to vote against this. No, I won't give way. I'm under time pressure and I need to deal with all the points that have been raised. Because this bill will be making it easier to attract, I've got at least half an hour of questions to answer, not least from the Honourable Member, and reduce the cost of capital. But Honourable Members have raised a number of points. I want to pay tribute to my Honourable friend for Kingswood, who raised the importance of the urgency of tackling the downscaling and ending of the existing nuclear fleet, and the urgency of getting this new financing in place, and the role of nuclear in levelling up in Somerset and elsewhere in the country. The Honourable Member for Gloucester powerfully setting out the importance of tidal. My Honourable friend for Morecambe and Lonsdale setting out the importance of the nuclear cluster in his constituency and the 24/7 supply of nuclear for reliability and resilience and baseload. My honourable friend, the member for Bolton West, for highlighting the role of nuclear in developing apprenticeships and skills and the role of this model in funding fusion. My honourable friend, the member for Beckenham and Workington, raising security. My honourable friend, the member for South Cambs, in a very powerful speech on the failures of the environmental movement to put such irrational fear in the way of the nuclear industry, setting us back 2 decades. My honourable friend, the member for the Vale of Glamorgan and the former Secretary of State for Wales, very powerfully making the case that Wales stands to benefit substantially, but we need to get the cost and the risk assessment right, and highlighting the role of small modular reactors. And my honourable friends for Clwyd West, who highlighted the role of the Welsh cluster, Waveney, who highlighted the role of Lowestoft and this industry in tackling coastal regeneration, and my honourable friend, the member for Ynys Môn, who's been a formidable campaigner for energy in her constituency and the whole of North Wales, and my honourable friend for Bury North. Given the extraordinary benefits, Mr Deputy Speaker, of this extraordinary sector, 60,000 people employed in the UK, 90% of those jobs not in the London and the South East, but all around the country. Each worker in the nuclear sector contributing an average of 96,000 GVA to the economy, 73% higher than the rest, and median average salaries of approximately 45,000. It's extraordinary why anyone would oppose it, particularly honourable members for Scotland, which has huge potential. The local economic impacts are huge. Look at Hinkley Point, well over 10,000 job opportunities, more than 3,600 British companies in the supply chain, and overall the project is on course to create 25,000 jobs. It's even more extraordinary to hear the members for the Scottish Nationalist Party opposite, when it isn't just Conservatives, it isn't just the nuclear industry, it isn't just the Her Majesty's opposition. Sir David Attenborough himself has said, "I do not question the use of nuclear energy as a way of solving our energy problems in the short term until we can solve the problems of storage and transmission of power." The UN Economic Commission for Europe said that international climate objectives will not be met if nuclear power is excluded. And if that isn't good enough for honourable members opposite and members of the Liberal Democrats, Zion Lights, former Extinction Rebellion activist and founder of Nuclear Needs Net Zero, said renewables alone would require unfeasibly massive amounts of storage we do not have to keep the lights on. We're in a climate emergency and we need all the clean energy we can build now, and that includes nuclear. And the trade unions, the GMB, Unite, Prospect, are all strongly in favour. I couldn't put it better than Charlotte Gills, the GMB's national officer, who said our environment, our economy and our communities need ministers and MPs to back new nuclear, and I hope all will tonight. Even members of the Green Party, Josh Stringfellow from Kingston Green Party, as Greens we trust the climate on climate change and we should trust the science on nuclear. Mr Deputy Speaker, across the board there's a recognition that we will not hit net zero unless we accelerate our investment in new nuclear, and this bill provides the framework for reducing the cost of capital and increasing our option for private investment, which makes it all the more extraordinary that we've had some of the opposition that we have. The Honourable Member for Southampton Test, in a thoughtful speech, I have to say, he pointed out a decade of dither and delay. I'm assuming he means from 1997 to 2007, when the then Labour government completely turned its back on the nuclear industry. The Honourable Member for Kilmarnock and Loudon, very interesting. Of course, the Scottish Nationalists like to have their cake and eat it. He's opposed to nuclear power, but of course Scottish consumers will benefit from being on the grid. They'll benefit from the baseload resilience and security that it gives us. I do hear loud and clear his call, and others, including my honourable friend for Gloucester, for more investment in tidal, and I can reassure the House that we are looking at making sure the Contract for Difference provides strong support for that sector. And the honourable lady for Richmond Park set out in a very thoughtful speech the importance of supporting net zero, but it's all the more strange that the Liberal Democrats support net zero but have a religious objection, seemingly, to nuclear energy. And I would point out that when I was PPS at the Department of Climate Change with her party leader, when he and his Liberal Democrat predecessor were Secretary of State for the Environment, it was they who put in place the Contract for Difference funding mechanism for nuclear, which didn't work and which we're now having to sort out. So it's easy to oppose with the benefit of hindsight, but the truth is this is urgent and this bill provides the base for it. I'm going to deal with the points that have been made. The Honourable Member for Richmond Park raised the point about household insulation. She's right, it's very important, and that's why we have provided in the budget an additional £1.75 billion to upgrade the homes of those on low income through the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund and the Home Upgrade Grant. And the Government is consulting right now on raising the standards for home insulation in new houses that are being built. A number of members have raised the issue of wave and tidal, and I'm delighted to confirm that not only is the Government, this department, funding great science and research into tidal and wave and other renewables. Indeed, at the Global Investment Summit last week, I visited wind and tidal technologies, and we secured nearly £9 billion of private investment internationally in the renewable sector. We are actively considering whether we should ring-fence tidal technologies in the next round of CFD, which will be eligible in Pot 2. Let me just deal with the other points that have been made. The Honourable Member for Kilmarnock raised the £30 billion cost saving, which he challenged. The full analysis and methodology is set out in the impact assessment accompanying this bill, and I can confirm that any overruns at Hinkley Point C, consumers will not pay. The current contract ensures that. The Honourable Member for Edinburgh North and Leith raised the issue of radioactive waste. And the truth is that we've been producing and managing radioactive waste perfectly successfully without accident, danger and health and safety for decades. 94% of that waste is very low level, and the Government has, as previous governments have, a strong plan for geological disposal facility. A number of colleagues raised the issue of national security, and I want to make it very clear that this bill is not concerned with making it difficult for any particular country or company to apply. The quality of the bids will be considered in due course by the Secretary of State with full accountability to Parliament. This bill does not determine any future nuclear project's ownership structure. Indeed, it simply creates a new financing model that broadens our options for new nuclear. And as a package, the legislation before members will help to end our reliance on overseas developers for finance, which has led to the cancellation of nuclear projects in the UK. Instead, this bill will ensure that our new nuclear power plants can be financed by British pension funds and institutional investors. But this is not about shutting out individual companies or countries. And the Government has already taken significant powers through the National Security and Investment Act. A number of colleagues have raised the issue of scrutiny of risk assessment, and I want to reassure members that the Secretary of State will be required to act transparently and with full disclosure to the House. I would close, Mr Deputy Speaker, by thanking right honourable members across the House for their contributions, highlighting that I hope very much the Scottish Nationalists won't divide the House tonight on something that Scottish voters will benefit from. I strongly believe this new funding model acts in the interest of the whole of this country, and I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be